Hey friends, and welcome to Let's Find Out About It. I hope you enjoyed reading Gilberto in the Wind for the last time. I saw that you all were able to help retell the story a little bit. You were answering questions and you were remembering all of the things that happened last time we read. So snaps and claps and pats on the backs to all of you for that. So if you remember from last time, we talked about wind, right? You may be a little confused. You may be wondering, why is Miss Khalees standing up right now? Usually I'm in my chair and we talk a little bit. But today things are going to go a little different. We're going to do an activity. So last week, like I said, we talked about wind. Can you tell me some of the things you remember about what we talked about? Yeah, what are some things you remember about wind? Okay. So I hope that was enough time for you all to share at least one thought of what you remember about wind. I remember that we talked about how wind is just moving air. There's air all around us, but it is invisible. We are not able to see it. But depending on the weather, that air may start to move and it may start to create wind. And we can feel that wind. It is still invisible, but we can feel it and we can see the different effects it has on different objects, like leaves blowing or even our hair blowing in the wind. We also learned that wind can inflate things. So when the air is moving, sometimes it can blow things up and get trapped in there and it can start to look inflated. Right here I'm blowing my pillowcase because that is one of the examples we had. We talked about pillowcases on the clothesline and how they can inflate. Lastly, we talked about different types of windy weather and how it can go from a nice cool breeze that you can enjoy outside, fly your kite, into a rough gust of wind where it knocks over trees and power lines and important things. So today what we're going to do is we're going to test different objects and we're going to see the difference between a low breeze and a heavier gust of wind. So right here I have my fan. You may have a fan like this in your house, something that you use when it gets kind of hot. And we know that the fan takes the air from our room and it blows it and it creates wind. But right here on my fan, I have different settings. You can see this knob right here. And it goes from 0, 3, 2, 1. So right now it's on 0 and that means it's turned off. When I put it on 3, it is a heavy gust of wind. When I put it on 1, it's a nice cool breeze. And at 2, it's a nice little in-between, just right, perfect kind of breeze. So, in the activity that we're going to do, I'm going to have a lot of different items. And we're going to test them. And we're going to put them in different categories. We're going to see if this item moved. We're going to see if the item was hard to move. Or if the item just didn't move at all. And I'm going to need your help, friends, okay? So this will be kind of difficult for me. I don't know how well I'll do with this. So I'm going to need your help predicting or guessing whether these items are going to move or not, okay? So let me see thumbs up if you understand you're ready to get into this activity. Okay. So let's get ready to start. So I have all of my objects back here that I'm going to test. And I have some signs right here that we're going to use to categorize these objects. The first sign says barely moved. So that means it moved a little bit, but not a lot. This sign says didn't move. So it didn't move at all. And this sign says moved. So the wind was able to blow. The first object we're going to test is this small basketball. It's not that heavy. It's round. So do you think the wind will be able to move this? Yes or no? Okay. Let's test. So we saw that basketball, it did move. It just took a little longer to move, but yes, it did move. The next object we have right here is this ball. It's round just like our basketball, but it's a little bigger and just a little heavier. It also has these spikes on the outside. So you think this will move? Yes or no? Or maybe just a little bit. What do you think? Okay, let's test it out. So, we saw that this did move just a little bit. It rolled back and forth, but it did not roll as far as the basketball. So, we are going to say that this one barely moved. The next thing we're going to test is our book, Gilberto in the Wind. Do you think this will move? Yes or no? Or will it barely move? Let's test it out. Oh, I see that our book, Gilberto in the Wind, did not move at all. So let's get the correct sign. It didn't move. The next thing we're going to test is this piece of paper. Do you think this piece of paper will move? Yes, no, or barely? I crumpled it up a little bit too, so let's see. Put this in front of here. We're blowing it. Looks like it's moving a little bit. Let's test that one more time. Okay, so I see that piece of paper move. Our bowl just rolled back and forth a little bit, but our paper did blow. So we're going to say that moved. Okay. The last thing we're going to test here is this chapstick. I see that it's very small in size. You can't really see it. Do you think this is going to move? Yes, no, or barely? Let's test this one. Okay, we're blowing it. I see that this chapstick did not move at all. So, this chapstick didn't move. Alright, so we tested all of those objects and let's talk about them just a little bit now. So first we're going to talk about the objects that did move. So right here we only had two objects that moved. We had this small basketball and this paper towel. So why do you think these were the only two items that moved? Okay. So maybe they are lighter than everything else. They're not as heavy as all of the different objects. Maybe the fact that this is a ball made it easier to move because it can just roll. See, this paper towel here is very light as well. So that is probably why these objects were able to move. They're the lightest objects of everything that we tested. Now, let's talk about the objects that barely moved. That moved just a little bit, but not a lot. The only object we had that barely moved was this ball right here. I know a lot of you predicted that this ball would move. You thought this would move. Maybe that's because the basketball moved, or maybe that's because this is in a circle. And like we said with the basketball, it's easier for things to move if they can just roll, if they're in an easier shape. But we look and see that this has spikes on the side. So it being a circle is not really going to help. It's still going to need a harder gust of wind that'll be strong enough to make it move. We saw that this wind made it move just a little bit. It jiggled back and forth. But ultimately the spikes kept it from moving because the wind was not strong enough to push it. So that is why this object barely moved. Maybe if it was just a little bit lighter, like the basketball, maybe that would have made it roll. The last objects we had that did not move at all, these objects didn't move. We had our book, Gilberto in the Wind. And then we also had some chapstick. I know that even I predicted that this chapstick would move, right? This chapstick is small, and it's not that heavy, and I thought it would move. But our objects that did move, our basketball and our paper towel, they're light. They're not that heavy. I know this chapstick is completely filled with chapstick you can put on your lips, so it adds a little bit more weight. And that may be why it didn't move at all. Our book Gilberto in the Wind, this was the heaviest object that we had. And we blew the wind on it on the third speed. We had it as high as it could go, and it didn't even budge. I thought maybe the papers would flap a little bit of something, but our book didn't move at all. And that's probably because this was the heaviest item that we had compared to all of the different items. I hope you enjoyed that activity, and now that we're done, you're going to go to your core member and you're going to do a smaller activity where instead of blowing things with the wind that something else creates, you're going to make your own wind and see if you can create strong enough gust of wind to move these objects. So I hope you enjoyed that activity, and I'll see you when you come back.
Hi friends, welcome back to Let's Find Out About It. Today we're going to see what objects move by blowing on them. So I know that we learned that wind can only work on light objects. And the lighter the object, the easier it will be for the wind to move it. And then if there's a really big object, it will take a lot of wind to move something. So when a tornado happens, sometimes buildings can get blown over, or cars. But when it's regularly windy outside, that wouldn't happen. Maybe some leaves on the trees would fall, like in our book, Gilberto in the Wind, when the apples fell from the trees with a small gust of wind. But it would take a really big gust of wind to move other things. So today we're going to see what things around our house can move by just simply blowing on them, and which ones won't. First I have this napkin. Our napkin was able to move really easily when I blew on it because it's so light. And it didn't take that much wind or my breath to move it. Let's go see what around our houses we can test to see if they will move by blowing on them. Now friends, I'm next to my fridge. Let's see if we can blow on the fridge to make it move. No matter how hard I blow, my breath won't be able to move the fridge because it's so big. So our tissue was able to blow with a little bit of wind, and our fridge was not able to blow at all. Even when I used a really big puff of air and blew as hard as I could, the fridge was not moving. But I wonder if there's something a little smaller that we could move with our breath. Maybe something like a marker. I was able to move that marker because it was circular, so it was a little bit easier to blow than our fridge. But two, because it's light in weight and it's able to roll freely by itself, so it didn't take much for me to blow on it. One last thing before we end today. Here I have a candle. Now our candle's pretty big, but not as big as our fridge, but bigger than our marker. So let's see if we can use our breath to move this with a really big gust of wind or air. No matter how hard I try, my candle's not gonna move because it's a lot heavier than our marker, even though it's lighter than our fridge. Thank you guys so much for joining me today and learning what objects we can move with our breath and what objects are a little bit too heavy. Now let's go back to Miss Khalees.
All right, friends, welcome back. We're just going to wrap up for Let's Find Out About It so you all are able to go to centers and have fun doing that. So today we talked about wind and how wind can move different things depending on how strong the gust of wind is and how strong that breeze is. So we talked about that whether something moves depends on the strength of the wind and also the weight of the object. I know there were plenty of objects that we thought would move, but they didn't because they weighed too much and the strength of the wind was not strong enough. So, I hope you enjoyed this activity today, and I will see you later at Sharing and Goodbye. So go have fun in centers, and we will talk about all of the different things we learned today later at Sharing and Goodbye. Bye, friends.